The journey of caring for a loved one who is living with dementia can be quite challenging. The aim of this podcast is to make caregiving less daunting and more fulfilling. On this platform, we share knowledge, understanding, and experiences. We enlighten, give hope, and encourage, and in the process, create positive awareness about different aspects of dementia. Welcome to my podcast, Dementia Caregivers Corner. My name is Julia Ratladi. Dementia Care, how deep is your love?
Welcome to Season 2 of Dementia Caregivers Corner podcast. I am honored to start this new season by paying tribute to someone who was incredibly dear to my heart, a woman who deeply inspired me and shaped my passion for dementia care, Jennifer Mavis Josey. Affectionately known as Jen, she sadly passed away last October 2024 from mixed dementia. May her beautiful soul continue to rest in peace. Today's episode is dedicated to celebrating her life. I am joined by Shellie Josey, Jennifer's only daughter out of her 4 children, including 3 sons. Together, we will chat about who Jen was as a person. We're going to chat about the family's journey navigating life with a parent living with dementia. And Shellie will share her own personal experiences as a caregiver for her mom. We'll also explore how the family is coping after their mother's passing. Ladies and gentlemen, let us welcome into today's episode none other than Shellie Josey.
Hello. Hello, Julie. Hello, everybody.
How are you doing this morning or this afternoon?
I'm good. I wish it wasn't so grey outside, but yes, I need a bit of sunshine. But yeah, I'm good.
Yeah. Yes. Let us talk briefly about Jen's background. Who was Jen? Who was she? What did she do for a living? Did she have a big family? Things of that sort. Who was she to the person who would want to know who Jennifer was?
So Jennifer she grew up in Guildford, Surrey. She actually had 2 sisters and a brother, Bill, Janet, and Anne. And unfortunately, Anne was actually born with a hole in her heart, so she wasn't very well. And she sadly died when she was 50. And it was such a shame because Jen was really close to her. But they all grew up in the Guildford area with her mum and dad. And, she was such a sweet, when I look back at pictures of her, she was such a sweet, lovely little girl. And when she got into the 60s and she, loved going out, and she had the big bouffant hair and she had all this beautiful black hair and she used to wear it all up in a beehive and she was so cool, 60s. And, she grew up with her brothers and sisters and she was Jen. She was just a rocking 60s chick. And yeah, she got married. I think she started dating a guy, Tom. She started dating when she was about 18, I think. And they married and had Jason and Bradley, my brothers. And unfortunately, Tom passed away at a very young age at work on the railway. So she was left to look after young Bradley and Jason, who, they were only 3 and 6 months old. So she got on with that and she got through it. And she then met my dad, who was Joe. And then the rest is history, really. They just, yeah.
They hit it off.
Yeah, they did. But no, she worked at the minute when she was younger. She had quite a few jobs, actually, but she worked at the Ministry of Agriculture and she was there for quite a long time. She had various other jobs. She liked doing bar work. She had a friend called June who had a pub, The Plough, and she used to work there for quite a long time. She just loved it. She was such a bubbly, chatty, friendly, outgoing person. So she just fitted in anywhere, really.
Oh, wow. Yes, that's interesting. We'll talk more about that as we continue with our conversation. So I want us to talk about Jen as a mother. I know Jen as a carer. I've got my beautiful moments as her carer. Beautiful, lovely. I want you to tell our listeners what kind of a mother was Jen before she was diagnosed with dementia.
She was a lovely mum. She was very firm. her mum was quite religious, so I think she was quite firm with her. So she was a firm mum, and she was not strict, but she wanted respect, like, which is, as a mother. But she was a loving mum, and I remember being a little girl, and she loved it because she dressed me up in lovely dresses and put bows in my hair and things like that. So she had that loving side to her, and having me as a little girl. But she obviously had a lot of struggles in her life, which had a massive impact on her life and how she looked on life, and I presume, like, the mental health side of things. So she was always dealing with that, as well as trying to be a mother to 4 children. I remember when we were young, and she received from the police, she received this like honor medal thing, because they saw her crossing the road with us all, and they just thought she did it so well, and what a great mum she was, and how she organised us all. And they just stopped her and said, we thought how you were with your children crossing the road, and so things like that. So she was such a loving, caring mum, even though she did have her difficulties, and she was quite strict. I think maybe that was from how her mother was with her. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a testament to show how good a mom she was. But how was she as a sister, especially that she was the last born? Was she spoiled that much by siblings?
Well, it's funny because she really looked up to her brother Bill, but I think she had, obviously she was very close with Anne, and Anne was obviously quite poorly and took a lot of her mother's time up. So I think Janet had said to me in the past about things that she felt with, that my mum was quite, I don't needy but I don't know if she felt that because she was the youngest, and then Anne had a lot of attention. So I think that was something that maybe went through with her to the very last end. But she had a great relationship with them, and still, before she died, she did, and they were all very close. And I think, with Janet, I have spoke to Janet since, and she just said, "Oh, your mum was always demanding this and demanding that." So she was obviously like that from a child.
The syndrome of being a last born.
Yeah. So she wanted all the attention, and she tried to get it, as we know.
Yeah, that's a great one. I want us to talk about the early symptoms. Some research that I have read shows that people do not know much about dementia until it hits home. So now I want to know, did you know anything at all about dementia? Not necessarily you and your family, or you had to learn about it after Jenny's first diagnosis?
So I think obviously dementia is something that's, it's out there, and a lot of people are being diagnosed with it more than ever, really. So you are aware of, what you can get with dementia. I just thought it was memory loss and things like that. I just presumed when mum didn't have it, and I'd never really been around anybody that had it. To me, it was just that you lost your memory and you forgot things, and you didn't, but obviously living with it is a whole different ball game and a whole different story. So yeah, you are quite naive to dementia, I think, until you experience it.
I like the way you put it. Yes. So there were some strange behaviors that she exhibited, that she showed, that we thought, what is wrong with mom? I want you to talk about some symptoms that she exhibited that you didn't know that is connected to dementia, like things that she did that you thought were strange as a family.
So that's a really good question, because with mum, she had always had, I don't want to sort of label her with mental health, but she did always have issues because she suffered quite with anxiety and things like that. And something happened to her when she was younger, and she was on medication, and a lot of things happened to her. So she did, she'd hate me to say that, but she did have certain mental health issues, but nothing that really you'd know. If you met Jen, you wouldn't ever think that. It was a lot in her past. Things happened actually when I was born. They put her down as having postnatal depression. So she was then put on tranquilizers. Now, in them days, they were a lot different to what they are now. And it affected her mental health. And my whole childhood, she did have mental health issues due from this, of having how it started with postnatal depression. So she always had ways that you thought, just how she was, her personality. I hate to use the word hard work, but she could be at times, a bit difficult or have hard work. And so that was just her, how she was. But then when my dad died, and do you know what, when I look back on it, it all started when my dad died, and they were so close, my mum and dad, and, they did everything together, absolutely everything together. They were like two peas in a pod. They really were. So when he died, she'd never really been on her own. And it was such a shock to her that he had gone. And I think she just didn't know how to live alone without him. And she missed him terribly. So when she was in grief at the time, and this grief went on and on, but when we looked back on it, there was just a few things that she did before he died. And it wasn't anything major. And I wouldn't have even associated it with dementia, but it was just things like, we went to a shop once. I was with my dad, and she'd got out the car and gone into the shop, and she came out, and we were sort of parked exactly where she'd left us. And she just couldn't sort of see us. She was sort of looking and really confused and sort of, and I remember my dad saying, "What is she doing?" And I was just like, I don't know. But she obviously, maybe that was just signs of it. I really don't know. But nothing really stood out, nothing at all. And then obviously when my dad died, she was very grief stricken, but for us, because how we always knew her and her personality, the things she started to do, we just associated with grief because that's what we thought it was. But she was quite, I don't want it to make it sound in the wrong way, but she was hard work. She was difficult. She was, we understood she was grieving and we were there for her, but she was quite sort of, it was about her grief and not anybody else's. And she was the one that was in grief, and that was a big thing. And it went on, and she was quite needy because obviously she'd never been on her own, and we were trying to deal with her grief, but she wanted us to be full on with her because she was on her own, which we tried our best. And then, she just started to have, it was probably after about 9 months to a year after my dad had passed, and she was just doing strange things. But again, we thought, is this just grief? Because we'd never really dealt with somebody so close up with grief. So it was understanding somebody's grief at the same time as trying to deal with your own grief. But she just started to be a bit paranoid, and I wouldn't, do you know what? It's funny because I think Bradley Moore would say it was forgetting things, but I didn't really notice that. I just noticed more things like she was paranoid or was sort of accusing people of things, and would sort of see people outside and sort of say, things like, my family have not been round to see me and we'd been there the day before. So it was things like that. But again, I still didn't think, she's got dementia or anything like that. And then I remember my brother Bradley said to me, I think there's something else wrong with her. I don't think she's just grieving. So we did decide to take her to the doctors, but she was so anti-doctors. So it was very hard to take Jen to a doctor, my mum, because she just was so anti-doctors because of what had happened to her with the tranquilizers and the past things. So to actually say to her, you're going to go to, the doctors and have a memory test, you couldn't say that to her because she would, in her eyes, she would be the last person to have dementia, and she wouldn't want to even mention the word. It wouldn't I wouldn't have anything like that, So I don't actually remember how we got her to the doctors, but we did take her, and she had a memory test at the doctors, which she failed. But again, we didn't heighten that to her. We just sort of, and then the next step was to take her to the hospital for a scan on her brain. And I remember I just took over at the discussion with the doctor because I knew that it would be something that she wouldn't accept or any sort of, whatever the outcome. And I remember sort of I was in town in Marks and Spencer's, and I had the phone call and they said the results are she's got vascular dementia and Alzheimer's. So in a way, it was an answer to how she'd been acting. And sort of, I thought if it was a relief that she had a diagnosis and there was a reason why she was acting the way she was. But then straight away, it was the daunting thought of what the future held for her. So, that was a big thing. So it was, like I said, it was just little things. But again, I never sort of associated it with dementia at first until I had the diagnosis.
And then she is now diagnosed with mixed dementia. And you knew that she was not going to accept the diagnosis.
Yeah.
What is the consequences for that? What is it that made your lives as a family difficult because of her refusal to accept the diagnosis?
Personally, myself, I don't think anybody to receive a dementia diagnosis is not, it's a difficult one, because if you're diagnosed with cancer, which is the worst news in the world, but there's a plan and there's treatment and you can hope to get better and you can have a positive outlook. But with dementia, there's no medicine that's going to make you better. There's nothing. And because of the way she was, to accept that would have just been, she just wouldn't have. She really wouldn't have. So we decided to just not ever mention it. And I remember how we dealt with that. Sorry, repeat the question again?
That is okay. No, you are on the right track. How did you deal with that? The fact that she refused to accept their diagnosis.
I never really sat her down and said, Mum, you've got dementia and Alzheimer's, because I know her reaction would have been, what are you talking about? I haven't got that, because a family friend also had it at the time. And she would talk about him and, oh, he's doing this and he's doing that. So we just always knew that she would never accept that. And we couldn't talk to her about it because she would have just blown up with it. So it was something that we had to deal with ourselves. But it was very challenging because of her behaviours. Yes. Like, again, going back to cancer, if someone had symptoms, you'd say, oh, you've got cancer and this is why you have, and they'd know that. But with dementia, I couldn't if she acted in a certain way, I could be like, well, Mum, you've got dementia, that's why you're acting like that. Because personally, I wouldn't want to keep saying that to somebody. It's a horrible diagnosis. Why would you want to keep bringing that up to somebody? But she was very denial of that, and you couldn't ever mention it. And I remember a couple of times my brother Spencer, in the stress of everything, sort of got a bit cross with her and was like, Mum, this is why, because you've got dementia. And she just totally like, whoa, what are you talking about? I haven't got dementia, and wouldn't even mention the word. You couldn't even mention the word around her. So that was very, very difficult, because we were dealing with daily problems with her, but could never really, just had to go along with it all the time. And herself, she never had a reason to say, I've got dementia, this is why I'm acting like this, because in her eyes, she was fine.
Now, after the diagnosis, you had to manage her new needs. What did you have to do as a family to accommodate her new needs? What did you have to change around her? What do you have to bring in so that she is comfortable as someone living with dementia? Any changes to the house, whatever that you have to change to meet her needs?
With Mum, it was it became nothing and then all, because she was still managing to cook for herself and clean herself and dress herself. So she didn't really need any help or any changes to her house with that. But it was more and I don't know if it was the dementia or the mix of dementia and how her brain worked with previous things, but it was more about her actions of paranoia and things that she would constantly be going out every day. So we didn't have to really adapt anything at home until something happened where she became very unwell. And the first part of her dementia was not necessarily forgetting things at home, but she was obsessed with things. She was constantly going to the same shops every day and going into town every day and repeating the same things, and became obsessed about her phone and her keys and things like that. So it wasn't necessarily anything we could change at home in our house, because she was still classed as, safe, because she was still cooking and remembering to do things like that. It was more a paranoia and things like that, which continued for a while. And then she wouldn't ever stay at home. So it came to a crunch where the first real thing happened that she went out to visit her brother on a really, really hot day. And I can't really remember how she got there, whether she got the bus or she walked, but it was quite far. And then she got lost. And the police, obviously she was overheated, she got lost, and the police eventually picked her up and they brought her home, and she was very poorly. The next day things happened, and really, until then, that was like even though it was a gradual thing of the things she was doing as the signs of dementia and the illness taking over. But until that actual day, from that flip of those 24 hours, everything really changed. It was quite a sort of surreal moment because the day before things were bad, but then the next day they were a whole different level of bad. And she was, and I remember I came the day she was poorly, and the next day I came to her house. Things had happened and it was just awful, and she was in such a state. And her memory had just declined just so badly within that. She did have an infection, which obviously, heightened everything, because we know that with temperatures and stuff, it can affect your brain and mind. It was really from then we had to go from nothing to obviously us supporting her and doing our best, to then carers having to come in, because she couldn't just be left on her own. And it was just that flip in those literally 48 hours of her trip in. She went into hospital and her paranoia and everything just doubled. It was very strange. It was very, even though it was a long build up of sort of about a year of having dementia, being diagnosed with it, to that flip of literally 48 hours to it increasing to such a really advanced.
Yeah, just not easy. Shellie, you need support. Everyone needs support. I mentioned that you have 3 brothers. Jen had grandchildren. You had uncles. You had aunts. What is the importance of family support when you are caring for someone living with dementia?
It's so important. It really is, because if you've got some people are not as fortunate to have siblings or a large family, but it's so important because to reach out to somebody else who's experiencing the same thing as you, and their opinion on things, and to support that person that's suffering with dementia. And sort of behind the scenes, you can be together and have plans and ways of dealing with it. But there is always that fine line, especially with close relatives. Like, as I said, I've got 3 brothers, but you have to be so careful. Again, that fine line of not, how can I put it? Just not falling out over it, because it's so intense. Living with somebody with dementia is so intense, and you are dealing with it 24/7, which we were. And at the time, if my mum wasn't having care. So the support is so important, but it's also so important to understand from everybody's point of view and stick together as a family and try and deal with it as a family, because it is one of the most stressful things you'll ever go through in your life, having a family member with dementia. And if your communication is not there with each other, and understanding and how you look at dementia together, if that's not on level, then it's not going to work, because you will always have, that how you're dealing with it. If you're not communicating with each other or helping each other, then it just doesn't work, because you'll end up falling out, or someone else has that opinion, or so it's very important to support each other, but also communicate is such a key. But it is the most stressful thing. You can't always be everybody's going to have different opinions to how they deal with things, but key is the communication to dealing with it.
I have talked with someone from the United States of America. They shared similar sentiments as you are, that you have to know who is strong in the family, or for example yours, who is strong in what area, and they deal with that area. But you agree on it, that okay, since Shellie is strong on the finance, let Shellie take care of the finance. Since Bradley is strong on the health, let him take that. But you just don't assume, you sit down and talk about it. I like how you put it. Thank you. Let's go on to friendship. Jen used to mention like 2 or 3 girlfriends or childhood girlfriends that she grew up with. But I think I've met 1 or 2 of those. What's the importance of friendship when we are having someone with dementia? Do you advise them to continue visiting, or should they stop? Does it matter the stage of dementia where the person is? What's your take on friendship and dementia?
I think friendship is very, very important, because going back to some of my mum's friends from a young age with dementia, a young age is a lot what you remember. So those people will be people that she'll always remember. And, you know, my mum did have quite a few friends and she was such a social person. So to go out with her friends, she absolutely loved doing that. So important. On a plus side, one of her close friends, her husband had died from dementia, or was dealing with it at the time. So that she was very understanding of it. Now dementia there's a lot of awareness about it. So people that she was close to were obviously aware of dementia and how it played out. So she would still socialise and it was understood by them. So, you know, she could still go out with her friends and still have social events. So I do think it's very, very important that, I mean, you know, if you're lucky in your life to have people that are understanding, which she did. So her friendships were very important and it's key because she would pinpoint those friendships and want to see them people all the time, and it kept her alive, it kept her happy, it kept her in this life, in this world, in Jenny's world, what she knew. So it kept her going. You know, friendships keep you going.
I do. I think I gave that example, the one that you just mentioned about one of her friend having had a husband who was diagnosed with dementia. And I was actually asking this doctor that could it have been because this friend had dealt with dementia and she understood, and I was referring to Jen, like she understood Jen better than the other friends. And they said yes, because she had some experience.
Yeah, and I do think as well it's the closeness of friends, because those friends that really understood her and you know wanted to spend time with her, whatever mood she was in, or you know if she could remember things or not, because she did have other friends in life that she had made maybe later in life that maybe didn't understand it as much and really didn't know if they wanted to be with her. One friend was sort of didn't know how to deal with it very well, so when she saw her, she sort of more or less treated her like a child, and it's because she didn't know how to deal with it. But her long friendships that she'd had since being a child, it was like she was Jen and no different.
You really bring in very important points there. I hope that whoever is going to listen to this podcast, you are mentioning very important points that I really wanted to touch on, and you're just bringing them up like that. So thanks, Charles. Let's talk about fulfilling Jen's wishes.
Okay.
You know, Jen was adamant that she didn't want to go to a care home.
Yeah.
We know that there are care homes that are good out there, very good. We know that there are care homes that are not so good.
Yeah.
Depending on different factors. Maybe some don't have enough carers. Maybe some do not have not yet trained their carers to that level. But what we know is that Jen didn't want to go to a care home. How did you manage to fulfill her wish of not going to a care home? Did you have to go to an extra mile? What did you have to put in to fulfill that wish?
Well, having a full head of grey hair is the way describing how I dealt with that, because it was one of the hardest things I ever had to deal with and fight for, really. There was two things really, because her mother had died in a care home. And I mean, care homes maybe back then were different as well as they are now. So she just saw this mother that was in a care home, not maybe, you know, I think she fell out of bed. And one time she went to visit her mum and she had a black eye. So my mum's picture of a care home was the worst place anyway. So I just remember as a child, she just had said to me she'd rather die than go in a care home. So that was just pinpoint stuck in my brain forever. And I sort of had to look at it as myself, as me, as making that decision for me. I personally, who knows what will happen to me when I'm older, but I don't want to go to a care home necessarily. And I understood that for her, because I felt that I had to completely take control of that. And as a person, she was my mum and I loved her, and that was her wishes and I had to fulfill that. And I wouldn't want to ever put her somewhere where she was distressed. And I knew she would be. And to be honest with you, I knew it would be such hard work for the care home as well, because she would have just been a nightmare and fought it, and it would have been such hard work. So, I had to take that on, and her wishes were to not ever go in a care home. And I spent the whole time of her dementia and when it was advanced, fighting and fighting and fighting to keep her at home, which to this day I can say that I did. But it was a real battle. And there was very stressful moments and tears and anxiety and everything that comes with it. But her wishes to me as a daughter were not to go in a care home. And I fulfilled that. And it was very, very, very hard work. And I feel that with a lot of social services or, doctors and hospitals, unfortunately, you are just a number. And to them, making that decision to put your loved one in a care home is as easy as taking a bite of a sandwich. It's just nothing. But to family members, it's something that you rather decide or you don't. And my decision for her voice, I was her voice, and her voice was not to go into a care home.
How did you support yourself? A lot of caregivers don't have time for themselves. They only have time for their loved ones.
If I'm honest, I didn't care for myself. I really didn't. And everybody will have different stories, but my personal own stories, there was no support really for me. And obviously I had the support of my brothers, but they weren't dealing with I was dealing with it every single day. And, I was dealing with every part of it, with her finances, her medical care, her home. I was dealing with everything, and I didn't really have any support. And I remember that I did call the doctors and I literally begged them and said, I don't know what I'm doing, because at one point I was in control of her medication and her everything, and I didn't know what I was doing. And I remember just saying to the doctor, I need help, please help me. And you know what? The whole time she had the dementia, which probably she had for about 5-6 years, I think that I only really felt I had the support from social team or doctors the last 8 months of that dementia. But I felt my support, apart from my brothers, I had none. And it is so important. And I do think that this country lacks supporting carers of people with dementia. It really, really does. You do have the Alzheimer's Society and you have all these different things, but it's not enough. It's really not enough. You need that support. People living with it's 24/7, and it can be hell. That's the only word I can describe it personally. There's moments where it's, oh my God, and I even remember my mum saying to me, I feel like I'm living in hell. It's so, so tough. And if you haven't got support, you break, you really do. And apart from, we were lucky to have such great carers for my mum, but there was a few that weren't so great. But, that's all I had really, to the carers to go to. And apart from that, I had no one. And there's just not enough support out there. There's not enough support for carers. There's not for family. And I even feel with carers that come from agencies, they're working 24/7. And to care for somebody, especially with my mum, she had live-in carers, and they lived with her 24/7. And that's such a thing to take on. But I don't feel they're supported. That their only support really is to get a break. But that's it. So as a family and as a daughter, the only real support I had was dealing with the carers every day. But there isn't enough support out there. There really isn't. And it's something that should be looked at, because there's no support for family members or friends or anyone dealing with it.
You are bringing up something that I have not thought of, the relationship between carers and the family. How important is that relationship?
It's probably the most important thing, because it's the relationship between yourself and the carer and that person that you're caring for. And I, as her daughter, to me, she was everything, my mum. And I always had that feeling that nobody could look after her like I could. So when I wasn't there, I was putting my whole trust in a carer to look after her. And if I couldn't communicate with that person, then it was lost. That part of it is so important, because you have to be able to leave your loved one with somebody that you trust, you can communicate with, you know that they're looking after that person like you would, or how you'd want. So the communication is such key. And, sometimes I used to think, God, I'm being such a high maintenance, or I'm being like, please do this and do this and do this. But I just couldn't, because she was my everything. And had to feel that she was being cared for like I would care for her. And luckily, I was lucky enough to have good carers that I could communicate with like that. And I could be at home and go to bed at night and sleep knowing that she was in good hands. But if you don't have that communication, and don't get me wrong, there was moments when we had carers and that might have been lacking, but I was quite quick to change it round and get someone else in. And, I
Yes.
was very on it, and I really was. And if you don't have that, it's tough because you're going home to try and switch off or relax and de-stress from it. And you can't if you haven't got that communication.
You were hands-on the way you are explaining it. How I want to know now, do you feel like you still have purpose? Like, is there anything that you wake up that gets you out of bed because you were so hands-on caring for your mom? How do I even put this? Do you think that you have purpose now after your mom's passing? Because you were so hands-on.
Yeah. Honestly, Jules, that's so interesting because I really, really struggled with that because as a daughter, watching her suffering with dementia was the worst thing in the world. It was truly, truly awful. And she suffered so much. She really, really suffered with it. She was in bed for 2 years with it. And it was just for her, and I saw different sides to her where she'd be loving and stroking my hair to then pulling my hair and things like that. And even though at the time it was so stressful for me and my life was so stressful and I was upset all the time and I was angry and I was, I felt terrible. And I always felt that when I was with her and all I wanted was for her to be at peace. She once said to me, I feel like I'm in this prison and I just wanted release from her for that. And I used to sit there with her and think, and sometimes I'd say to her, you don't worry, my dad is going to come and see you soon and you're going to be together. And when I used to go and sort of visit his grave, I would say, she's waiting for you now. Come and get her. She's ready. I really thought that when she went, I would feel relief, but I didn't. I felt relief that she wasn't suffering, but I missed that life. And that is a really strange thing to say. And it's something that I never thought I would say, but I missed that life because it was my life. My life was working or, my children, but a massive chunk of my life was her. And I didn't feel relief. I didn't. It was so traumatic, but I missed her, even though she was in bed and she was aggressive and didn't know who I was half the time and she was in this living hell. But because it was my life, in a really strange way, I missed that life. It sounds strange to say because you think it's somebody suffering, but I didn't miss her suffering, but I missed. So it was very, very hard and still to this day, it was a lot of my time. Now I've got this time. Whereas before I'd be like, oh, I'll go and see my mum today. And I'm not doing that. And I still haven't adjusted because I don't feel like, it's just
Relief.
yeah, I just don't feel like that. And I'm sure that will come in time. But, I have all this time now and I still think I've got to go to my mum's or I still think I've got to do this and I don't. But if I'm brutally honest, I'm really not there. I'm still at this 100% heightened because, it's really hard to switch off from it. It's something that just doesn't go overnight. It really doesn't. And, I'm so glad that she's at peace. But I felt so sad for her because dementia robbed her life and robbed Jenny and the life she could have had. And I'm very traumatized by everything that I saw. And I think as a family, the only word that Spencer mentions a lot, and he said, we felt it was so unfair for her, and that is hard to deal with because she suffered so much and you can't forget that. And a lot of people have said to me to have good memories. Think of good memories and the time you had, and that will bring you comfort. But at the moment, I'm living in that's all I remember. That her having dementia and what it brought to her life and how sad I feel so sad for her, what she experienced. And so that's what in a strange way, I just miss that. When you've got something in your life that consumes it and it's 24/7 and then it's gone within a day, you think it's a relief, but in a way you're trying to adjust to that life has gone. However bad it was, you're still adjusting to it. It doesn't matter whether it's a good thing in your life or a bad thing in your life. it's letting go of that in the same way, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Do you think there's support available for when someone has lost their loved one through dementia?
No. If I'm honest, there is from family members. If you're talking, if like professionally,
Yes, professionally.
there's nothing. I've had no contact or support from anyone. And as family members, you do have, family that reach out to you. But again, when you're like what I just said before, like all my family and friends say to me, well, at least she's not suffering anymore. But she's still my mum. I miss my mum. Whatever illness she had or situation she was in, or whether half the time she didn't know who I was, but I'm not there because I'm missing her.
Yes.
So there's the support you get from your friends and family, but that support is, oh, what a relief, it's over, and she's not suffering, and what a nice life she had, and she had a good innings. That word, she had a good innings, but I'm missing my mum. My partner is great support, but I think more should be done or understanding from support of how you miss someone that had dementia, a loved one. So no, I think more needs to be done about that, but there's not great support out there. And like just last thing with my brothers, they're sort of now, I'm so glad it's over for her and she's not so, and I agree with that. But touching back to, I miss that craziness, and it's really strange. I miss that. Yeah.
So there is a gap because right now you wake up and you're like, you were supposed to have gone to see Jen, but Jen is no more.
Yeah.
And now you don't have anything to substitute that with.
No.
It cannot be good because now you feel like you're empty. You've got no purpose.
Yeah. Yeah. And to replace that and trying to be happy again, because that was so sad. That's such a sad part of my life. And it's something that I'll never, ever forget or get over. And I'll always have at the present, I'll always have all bad memories, which I know eventually the good memories, but it's very hard to watch a loved one suffer and how you try and move on from that and forget that. But I do struggle, and I am struggling. I really am. If I'm honest, I'm really struggling. And there's not really many people I can talk to because my brothers sort of are different. Men are different how they deal with their emotions. And they're sort of like, well, she's gone and we've got to get on with it, get on with our lives. But I have so much memories and physical emotions to attach to it. So I do struggle, and obviously getting out of bed every day is hard, and she's on my mind all the time, and I get sad and I feel sad about her, and I miss my mum. I really miss my mum. So it is difficult to move on from it, and I know it's life and life goes on, but it's something that sticks with you forever.
It does. And even the memories that you're talking about, because they are the recent ones, I guess that's why they're always in your mind. Yeah. But obviously you have to take as much time as you can because we grieve differently. We are not going to impose the way we grieve on other people. Just take your time to grieve the way that would work for you. Yeah. Coming to the end of the episode, maybe there's something that I might have not asked you that you think will benefit our listeners. What advice do you have for our listeners? Maybe for children whose parents live with dementia.
I feel that going on that, with dementia, I think if you've got a loved one that's got dementia, it really is all about the keys are understanding, even researching ways to deal with things. I remember I always used to say to my mum, oh, do you remember when we did this? Or do you remember that? And I eventually learned just from good that that's not the right thing, because you're always questioning someone about the remembering things, and you should and I eventually used to just agree with my mum. So everything she said, I would be, even if she said, oh, have I seen her dad or things, I would just go, oh yeah, I saw him the other day. And I think that's key, things like that. I think supporting that person as much as you can, but you have to have the help. You can't do it alone. You've got to get as much support as you can, and you have to deal with it the best way that you can. But you also have to consider and take upon yourself that you are only human, and you are dealing with it the best way you can, and there's no right and wrong way, and you have to just be that for that person, but you have to take care of yourself. You really have to take care of yourself and have the support you can, because it's very, very important to look after that person, but look after yourself. That's what I would recommend to anyone. Just get the support and as much as you can, but also take time for yourself, which is difficult. I know it really is when you're in it and living it. Trust me, I'm saying this, but when I was, I didn't do it as when I did, but now I can say it.
Yes.
As if someone was to come to me and say my mum's got dementia, I feel like I could reel off a book of advice.
Oh, yes, you should actually.
Yeah.
You should write that book. Okay. No, thank you, Charles. Thank you for taking your time to talk to our listeners. I know this episode will resonate with a lot of people because you really touched the most important points, even the ones that I was not even thinking of. Thank you very much for this.
Well, thank you so much for letting me talk about her and my experience. And it's good to get it off your chest, isn't it? And let it out. So it's beneficial to me as well. So it benefits me in a lot of ways.
Thank you. Let me take this time to thank you, our listeners, for tuning into this episode. If you enjoyed our conversation or feel passionate about dementia care, like this episode, please subscribe, leave a review, like it, and share with someone who might benefit from it. Your support helps us reach more listeners and raise awareness about dementia-related issues. Until next time, take care. Bye for now. Ta-da!
Dementia care. How deep is your love?